Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast, Episode 72.
Welcome to the Out of Order Podcast, your window into the firearms community, exploring those shaping the future of our rights and protecting our lifestyle, laws, legal cases, activism, and self-defense in a candid and honest podcast for our brothers and sisters in arms. Here's your host, James Kalita.
Thanks again for tuning in to episode 72 of the Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast. Today's sponsor is sellmorefirearms.com. Sellmorefirearms.com, where you can get a free guide for your FFL on how to use social media to increase firearm sales in your store. And of course, you could always help out the show by going to the show notes page, outoforderjameskalita.com/72, and checking out our sponsors. Liberty Classroom, where you can get the history and economics lessons they didn't teach you in college, and Liberty Maniacs, where you can get some of the coolest pro-gun t-shirts and gear. Let's see, and today's guest is Tom Kehoe. Tom is the chairman of the Project Appleseed Oversight Committee, and he's also the owner of Malabar Gun Leather. And now, here's Tom.
Tom Kehoe, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, James.
Oh, my pleasure. And Tom, you are the chairman of the Project Appleseed Oversight Committee. Would you tell us a little about Project Appleseed?
Sure. Project Appleseed aims to train the next generation of American riflemen and riflewomen. And for us, a rifleman is more than a man with a rifle. A rifleman is a man who knows his rifle. When you come to one of our weekend boot camps, we want to give you the skills that you need to be able to hit a 20-inch target at 400 yards. The program that we teach was originally pioneered by the U.S. Army. After World War II, they started getting away from traditional marksmanship. Only the Marines today really kind of maintain that tradition of strong marksmanship. But that's what we teach at Project Appleseed. We have the best trained instructor cadre in the country, and they're all volunteers. It takes an average of about 160 hours of hands-on training to become a full instructor for Project Appleseed. And to get into that instructor program, you have to be able to shoot an expert score repeatedly on our course of fire. So if you come to an Appleseed and you see someone in a red hat, you know that person is an expert rifleman and that they can teach you to shoot better.
Wow, that's an excellent standard, and I think a lot of people, they have rifles, they shoot, and they think they can shoot well, but a 20-inch target at 400 yards, especially for someone like me who grew up in New Jersey, where I think the furthest range we have in the state is 300 yards. So, so suppose we had guys out there that have been in the military, would they still benefit from something like this?
Oh, absolutely. We get folks from ROTC programs coming to our shoots. We get folks who are in various military units right now coming out to learn some pointers. And we've actually done our boot camps on base for a number of military units, guys getting ready to go over to the sandbox, and we do some free training for them. So, pretty much anyone can benefit from coming to an Appleseed.
Now, is it basic enough for someone who's never held a rifle before? Are they going to be okay coming on the range?
Well, we're obviously not going to progress as fast as someone who has some experience, but we take folks of all ages and all experience levels, and you see interesting things when you do these shoots over and over again. We had one family come to a shoot down here in Florida a number of years ago. Mom and Dad came with their two boys and their daughter, and Grandma came to a couple of shoots too. And it was really funny because after 3 or 4 shoots, Mom had scored rifleman, and the 10-year-old daughter had scored rifleman, and even her 90-year-old mother-in-law had scored rifleman. None of the guys in the family managed to make the rifleman score. Now, it's not an easy thing to do, to earn that rifleman's patch. You have to be able to shoot 210 out of 250 and do it from 3 different positions and do it under time. Most of the stages give you about a minute to get off your shots. So you do have to know what you're doing. You have to be able not just to be a good marksman, but to handle your rifle quickly and efficiently. But regardless of your skill level, we can get you to that standard if you're committed enough.
So what was I mean, I heard you say that this was originally a military program, but how was your organization started? What was the inspiration there?
Well, our founder is a fellow named Jack Daly. He goes by the nickname Fred. Fred was actually his dog's name. But Jack had a range that he opened up in North Carolina about 15 years ago. And he started doing weekend boot camps for folks who had Garand rifles. Jack at the time had a business selling Garand rifle stocks and Garand rifle slings and some other military surplus related to Garand rifles. And so he started doing these boot camps to teach people how to shoot their Garands better. And up in North Carolina, you can get a great deal of land, and so he set up a range that had target lines at 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, and I think 600 yards as well. And so he was able to really run some good camps up there and do some real solid instruction. And what he discovered was that there was a real hunger for that kind of instruction. There just really wasn't anything quite like it at the time. And on a whim, he started looking around the country and looking for other places that he could run some of those shoots. And pretty quickly, he found a couple of other folks who were interested in doing these shoots with him. And they started taking it on the road, and that was the origin of Project Appleseed. Now, since then, Project Appleseed has morphed a great deal. We refer to those days as the hairy-legged men days, because back in those days, most of the folks who came to our shoots were older men who were experienced, lots and lots of World War II veterans or Korean War veterans, guys who had used a Garand or an M14 in service and were eager to learn how to shoot them better. As we started getting more publicized, we started making our program more flexible, and we came up with new versions of it so that we could offer it at a much wider variety of venues. As you said, there's not a whole lot of places in the country where you can go out and shoot 400 yards. By the way, I'm a New Jersey guy myself. I was born and raised up there, spent the first 28 years of my life up there. And when I was involved in shooting up there, the only rifle range we had at my local club was an underground range, and it was I think they had 2 bays that were basically cement pipes, and they were underground. And shooting at 30.06 or 3.08 in one of those was really an experience.
I bet. Wow. And was it a 100-yard pipe or?
Yeah, it was a 100-yard pipe, and
wow.
It's the limitations of being in an urban state, even though I grew up in a very rural part of the state.
Wow. And so someone, coming into the program now, you mentioned it's more flexible, and I've seen some events where the shooting's done with a 22.
Sure.
How well do the skills translate? Yeah.
We run a variety of different shoots these days, and their program has been adapted so that we can teach it in a much wider variety of places. Down here at my home range, Port Malabar Rifle and Pistol Club, we've got a 600-yard range, so we can do full distance shoots. But most of the shoots we do down here are still scaled today to 25 yards, actually 25 meters. Now, when you shoot on one of our targets, the target is scaled as if you were shooting at 100, 200, 300, and 400 yards. But it's simply a whole lot easier to go down and do target diagnosis and check everyone's hits when you're running back and forth over 25 meters and not 400 yards. So it's much less exhausting. And when you come to Project Appleseed or Weekend Boot Camp, you will work. You'll probably put 500 to 600 rounds down range during one of our scaled shoots. That's regardless of whether you're shooting a 22 or a centerfire rifle. We also do some special programs. We do Appleseeds for folks who have various disabilities. And we have a special program that we call the Lady Seed, which is a weekend boot camp run for women, by women. And it has a much different flavor to it, and the ladies who attend it all seem to love it.
And I understand there's also a history component to Project Appleseed?
Yeah, that's one of the things that really distinguishes Project Appleseed from most other instruction. And again, it kind of came from Jack's personal preferences and experiences. When you come to an Appleseed, we teach you two things. As I said, number one is marksmanship. We want you to become a rifleman. But we also teach you why it's your heritage as an American to become a rifleman, because our nation was founded by riflemen. We will tell you the true story of how the nation was founded on April 19th, 1775. It's the nation's real birth date. That's when the colonists outside of Boston rose up against the British, and it's quite an extraordinary story. Now, most people have heard part of that because of the poem that was written almost 100 years later, the one that goes, "Listen, my children, and you shall hear the midnight ride of Paul Revere." And the good part of that poem is that it keeps those events in people's minds to some degree. The bad part is that almost everything about the poem is inaccurate. To start with, Paul Revere didn't ride out on his own. There were at least two other riders who were with him, and there may have been others. It's just not clear from history. The other thing is that the poem gives you the impression that this was kind of an accidental sort of thing that happened, and in reality, it was very well rehearsed and very well organized. Revere didn't go riding through the streets calling out, "The British are coming, the British are coming." One thing, all the colonists thought of themselves as British to begin with. What he actually did is he went and contacted a particular group of people in a variety of towns outside of Boston. They were all community leaders. And those community leaders then alerted their lieutenants, and they alerted other folks. It was kind of the 18th century equivalent of a phone tree. What was really one of the extraordinary things about that story, though, is that Revere and his compatriots were out riding well after midnight, and by about 11 o'clock the next morning, there were 10,000 armed militiamen who had basically left their homes in the middle of the night and run across the mountains and came to the areas around Lexington and Concord to stand up for their neighbors and defend them from the British. It's really quite an extraordinary story. When you think about that, how many people could you get to come out and stand alongside you if you or your family were threatened by a military force? Could you get one or two? And they summoned 10,000 folks. Now, the majority of them didn't actually fight that day. They figure only about 3,000 of them actually fought with the British. But it's an extraordinary thing nonetheless. Just standing up against the British Army in those days, that was a capital offense. It could be summarily executed. No trial, no jury, just a quick bullet between the ears or a bayonet to the heart. And yet all those people were willing to come out to defend their communities and their neighbors because they took such a high price on liberty. The other thing that gets lost in the translation is that those men didn't turn out of their beds and leave their families because they were worried about taxation or they didn't think they were getting proper representation. They turned out to stand against the British because the British were out to confiscate guns from folks in the town of Concord. They had spies in the Americans' camps, and their spies had told them that there were a lot of muskets and cannon and powder and shot being stored out in the town of Concord. And so the British sent 1,700 troops out to seize all those military stores. In point of fact, they didn't actually get the military stores because the Americans were alerted in France, and they were able to hide them. But it was about one of the first attempts at gun control in the colonies, and the colonists weren't having it.
Yeah, and that's definitely a story that needs to be told and told in more detail, because it's skimmed over and toned down in all the history classes that I remember growing up.
And if you grew up in New Jersey, you were in the cradle of the Revolution, you know.
Right.
I grew up in a little town called Martinsville in Somerset County, And the big main thoroughfare there was called Washington Valley Road. It was called that because Washington spent several of his winters there planning the Revolutionary War. And at the far end of the road, there was a place called Washington Rock that was a very steep and overlook at the edge of the Watchung Mountains. And Washington kept scouts out there to spy on the movements of the British. So the area I grew up in was steeped in the history of the Revolutionary War. They still didn't teach it to us when I was in school.
So Tom, how did you become involved in Project Appleseed?
Well, I'm the chief instructor at the biggest gun club down here in Florida. And we have about 4,000 members, 122 acres. We have 14 ranges. So some years ago, I think it's 7 or 8 years ago already, folks who ran Project Appleseed were trying to expand and find ranges to host their shoots further into South and Florida. And so they came before the board of directors and said, we'd like to do one of our shoots here. And we did a little research on them, and it sounded pretty good. And so we gave them approval to run one tentatively. And I signed up for the shoot to get some first-hand experience with it. Part of my responsibility as chief instructor was to kind of give a recommendation on whether classes are allowed and to make sure that safety standards are being met. And by the end of that first shoot, they'd come to me and said, basically, you're our boy. We want you for our program. And I was very impressed. I'd been a small board competitor when I was a teenager at a national ranking. So I was pretty familiar with how to shoot with a rifle and a sling. I hadn't done it in 25, 30 years. And by the end of that first day, they had been shooting on a par with what I had been 30 years ago. But more than that, I understood why or how to shoot better. When I was a kid and you learned that, it was kind of like groping around in the dark. You figure something out here or there, and maybe you'd share it with your buddies, and you'd learn a technique or two, and kind of held on to the secrets. At Appleseed, there's no secrets. These guys know this stuff, up, down, left, right, and they want everyone to know it. So not only was I back to shooting on at least a competitive level again with the first day, I had a much better grasp of how and why I can improve my shooting. They have a target that they call the AQT. It's modeled after the old Army qualification test, and today we call it the Appleseed qualification test. They shot one of these targets at the end of the day to make riflemen not be able to shoot to 10 out from 3 different positions. And it just so happens that it was a typically miserable Florida spring day. By the end of the day, we had this fierce downpour and high winds, and the winds were blowing so hard that the bottom of the target line was actually kind of ripped out, and the targets were flapping up at a 45-degree angle. And I managed to shoot riflemen in those conditions that first time. And it's probably some of the best shooting I've ever done. I made riflemen by about 2 points, but I was very proud of that score. And it's a tribute to the precision and the clarity of the instruction model of Project Appleseed. And so I was hooked, and I got into the instructor program from there, and just kind of went rolling with it. A few years after that, when Jack decided it was time for him to retire from running the program, he created a board to oversee his program, and he asked me to step into that board, and that's how I got involved with the national leadership of the program.
And probably tremendous amount of time commitment there. And you also, while you're volunteering to do this, you also have a holster manufacturing company. Is that correct?
Well, it's a small family business, but we make custom holsters and belts and accessories for folks who carry concealed. And Florida was kind of at the leading edge of the concealed carry movement in the United States. I don't know if you remember back those days, but as someone who's been involved with the Second Amendment and shooting for about 45 years, and I remember growing up, especially growing up in New Jersey, thinking by the time I was a grandfather, the Second Amendment would basically have been erased from the United States. So everything was anti-gun. There were constantly new laws being proposed to limit your rights. And it really wasn't until the concealed carry movement started in Florida passed it that you really saw that pendulum starting to swing in the other direction. And of course, our experience down here in Florida is that folks with concealed carry permits are amongst the safest and most law-abiding citizens in our state and in the nation. Any number of studies have shown that they're actually more law-abiding, in fact, than the bulk of police officers. And so it kind of spread out from here. And when I retired from my corporate job, it seemed like an interesting business to get in. I had more time to put into to working with Second Amendment groups, and it seemed like a good opportunity to provide some better gear for folks. I know when I was a kid, Yankee and Safariland and a half dozen other national companies made really fine quality leather holsters, and most of that has gone away. Most of them deal today in laminates and plastics and gear that's made in Mexico or China or that kind of thing. And the high quality holster market has basically become a cottage industry. The giants in the industry, outfits like Milt Sparks, are actually really small companies. Milt has passed on some years ago. The guy running that company today, a fine fellow, and he's got 3 guys working for him. That's the whole of the Milt Sparks holster making company, and that kind of reflects the whole industry. Most of the custom holsters are being made by small companies with just a couple of employees, and that's kind of where we're at as well.
Excellent. Well, Tom, I always ask my guests if there are any books they recommend that all gun owners should read. Any come to mind?
Well, the kind of the Bible of the Appleseed program is a book written by a fellow named David Hackett Fisher. Fisher is a Pulitzer Prize-winning history professor, and I think it was the first book he published. It was called Paul Revere's Ride, and it's a meticulously annotated account of what happened on the evening of April 18th and into the morning and afternoon of April 19th, 1775. The cool thing about it is it reads like a novel. He's just a great writer, and he brings excitement and insight into that whole period of time. And if you want to understand what it means to be an American, you really need to study that period and understand where our roots were and where we came from. And so that's one book I'd recommend really highly. But he's written a number of others. He wrote one called Washington's Crossing. That may be the one he won the Pulitzer for. And it's an exhaustive account of Washington as a military leader and of the extraordinary events that led up to Washington crossing the Delaware. And you realize, we grow up idolizing George Washington at some level, but we don't really know any of the things that make him so extraordinary. There's at least 3 separate occasions where Washington pretty much single-handedly saves the United States. One of them, of course, was with the crossing at the Delaware. That basically saved the Revolution. But years later, when after the war was won, Washington saved the country again before ever becoming president, because the military was so fed up with the incompetence of Congress that they basically wanted to stage a coup and make Washington king. And Washington refused and literally pleaded with this group of military officers to give democracy and the republic a chance. And it's quite an extraordinary thing. It's quite an extraordinary man. And I would recommend that book real highly. The third one that I would recommend real highly is also by Fisher, and it's called Liberty and Freedom. And it's another very thick volume that examines what the founders meant by these concepts, liberty and freedom, and how they were drastically different from one group of colonists to the next. what freedom meant to folks who were living in Baltimore, for example, was very, very different than what freedom meant to folks living on the frontier of Kentucky. And it's really a fascinating and thought-provoking book. And again, it really examines kind of the roots of freedom and liberty and how they came to represent the American experience.
Thank you. I will put links of those on the show notes page, and links to Project Appleseed and Malabar Gun Leather. Any other links I should include up there?
I think that'll do it.
All right. Great. Well, Tom, I thank you very much for being on the show. Any parting words for our listeners?
We have within the program, we say that marksmanship is really kind of the hook to get people to come to an Appleseed and listen to the story about how the United States was founded and the values that our ancestors held. And when we say we want to return America to being a nation of riflemen, we mean riflemen in a much broader sort of sense than simply someone who's good with a rifle. Our ancestors believed in self-responsibility and self-sufficiency. They believed in community. They believed in being involved in their community. And one of the things that we try to inspire people with in Project Appleseed is to get off the couch and get them involved. Typically a shoot boss will ask the folks who assemble for a shoot, how many think the nation is going in the right direction? And it's not a cue for a particular political viewpoint. We can't discuss modern politics in Appleseed. But what we quickly find out is that virtually nobody thinks the country is going in the right direction. We get conservatives at Project Appleseed, we get Democrats, we get liberals, we get progressives, we get libertarians. But nobody thinks the country is going in the right direction. So the question is, why aren't you doing something about it? If you believe the country's going in the wrong direction, it's up to you to try and save it. And if you don't do it, who will? Our ancestors fought with the cartridge box so that we wouldn't have to. We can fight with the ballot box. We can fight with the soap box. We need people to get up and make their voices heard in our communities, in public hearings, and in town halls. We need responsible people to get involved with local government again. Because if the country's going to be saved, we're the ones who are going to have to do it.
Well, Tom, I thank you so much for being on the show, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Sounds good, James. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks again for tuning in to the Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast. The show notes page for today's episode is outoforderjameskalita.com/72. And you'll find links to the books Tom mentioned and to Project Appleseed and Malabar Gun Leather. So please head on over there. And of course, you can always help out the show by using our Amazon affiliate link, checking out Liberty Classroom or Liberty Maniacs. And please remember to sign up for that email list. Really important. Yesterday, got locked out of Facebook again, and we all know it's just a matter of time before we, as gun owners, are entirely kicked off of every social media platform. So great way to maintain comms is to head over to outoforderjameskalita.com, enter your email address. I'll send you some free stuff, and you'll be up to date on all the latest 2A news. It's Out of Order James Kalita. We'll see you next time.